The desperate call, the silver spires of Calovia Prime reached toward the twin suns like fingers of hope. For 3,000 years, the Calovian people had built their civilization on principles of harmony and knowledge. Their cities were monuments to peace, their libraries held the wisdom of 100 worlds, and their people had never known the meaning of war. Chancellor Veron stood in the observation chamber of the Grand Citadel, watching his world transform into something unrecognizable. The beautiful gardens below, where Calovian children had played just days ago, were now covered in a creeping crystalline growth that pulsed with an eerie violet light. The scourge had arrived without warning, and now they were consuming everything. The Calovians were a gentle species, tall and slender with skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. Their large, expressive eyes had evolved to see beauty in all things, not to track predators or spot danger. Their long, graceful fingers had been shaped by evolution to create art and manipulate delicate instruments, not to hold weapons. They were scientists, philosophers, and artists. They had never imagined they would need to be anything else. Veron turned from the window as his chief advisor. Minara entered the chamber. Her silver skin had dulled to an ashen gray, a sign of extreme stress among their people. She carried a data tablet that trembled in her hands. The crystalline spread has accelerated, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. The scourge entities have consumed the outer colonies completely. They are now within 50 kilometers of the capital. Our energy shields are failing. She paused, struggling to continue. We have perhaps 12 hours before they reach the civilian shelters. Veron closed his eyes. The scourge were unlike anything the galaxy had encountered before. They were not machines like the harvesters that plagued some systems, nor were they biological invaders seeking resources. The scourge were something in between, parasitic crystalline life forms that fed on both matter and energy. They infected everything they touched, converting organic and inorganic material into more of themselves. They grew exponentially, and they felt no pain, showed no mercy, and could not be reasoned with. The Calovian defense fleet had tried to stop them. Every ship had been infected within hours, the crystal growths spreading through their hulls like cancer. The pilots had barely escaped with their lives. Ground forces had attempted to establish containment zones, but the scourge simply grew through, over, and around every barrier. Conventional weapons seemed only to make them spread faster. What about the Galactic Council? Veron asked, though he already knew the answer. Have they responded to our requests for assistance? Minara's expression told him everything. The Alterian Republic sent condolences, but said their fleet is engaged elsewhere. The Zephyr Collective offered to accept refugees, but cannot spare military support. The others have not responded at all. She hesitated before continuing. Chancellor, we both know the truth. No one wants to risk their forces against the scourge. They are afraid that their ships will become infected and carry the contamination back to their own worlds. Veron felt the weight of his failures pressing down on him. He was the leader of his people, and he had no way to save them. The Calovians had spent millennia building relationships with other civilizations, sharing their knowledge freely, offering aid wherever it was needed. Now, in their darkest hour, they stood alone. There is one option, Minara said quietly. We could activate the ancient emergency protocol, the one that sends a distress signal to all systems in the galaxy, including the restricted zones. Veron turned to face her sharply. The restricted zones are quarantined for a reason, Minara. Those are the death worlds, the places where life evolved under such harsh conditions that the species who developed there are considered dangerous to galactic civilization. Minara met his gaze steadily. We are dying, Chancellor. Our people, our culture, our entire world will cease to exist within ours. What do we have to lose? Veron thought about the stories he had heard about the Death World species. There were several in the galaxy, But one stood out in particular. Earth, the humans. They were the species that frightened even the bravest warriors in the Galactic Council. They came from a world so hostile that merely surviving there required adaptations that other species found disturbing. He remembered the classified reports he had read when he first joined the Council. Humans could survive injuries that would kill most species. They healed rapidly. They could function in temperature ranges that would be lethal to Calovians. They had evolved as persistence hunters, chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. But more than their physical capabilities, it was their psychology that worried the galactic community. Humans had a concept called stubbornness. They would continue fighting, even when logic said they should surrender. They had another concept called vengeance, where they would pursue those who harmed them or their allies with relentless determination. They felt something called righteous anger when they witnessed injustice. These were not rational responses. These were the responses of a species that had evolved in constant conflict with their environment and each other. The Galactic Council had classified Earth as off-limits 50 years ago after the humans' first contact mission. The human delegation had seemed friendly enough, but their mere presence had been unsettling. They moved like predators. They showed their teeth when they smiled. Their eyes were forward-facing, the mark of a hunter species. When they described their world and their history, several council members had required medical attention. But now, looking at his dying world, Viron wondered if perhaps a predator species was exactly what they needed. "Do it," he said finally. "Send the emergency signal to every system in the galaxy. Include the restricted zones. If humans or any other Death World species receive it, so be it. I would rather risk the unknown than accept certain extinction." Minara nodded and moved to the communication console. Her fingers danced across the holographic controls, setting up the wide-band emergency broadcast. This signal would reach every corner of the galaxy using ancient technology that bypassed normal communication protocols. It would take tremendous energy, draining the last reserves of their planetary defense grid. But nothing else mattered now. "What should the message say?" she asked. Viron thought for a moment, then spoke clearly. "This is Chancellor Viron of Calovia Prime. We are a peaceful civilization under attack by an entity we cannot stop. The scourge is consuming our world, and we have no defense against it. We call upon any civilization capable of helping us. We offer everything we have, all our knowledge, all our resources, all our gratitude to anyone who can save our people. Time is running out. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help." Minara's fingers completed the sequence, and the message launched into space, carried by waves that would reach across the galaxy in minutes. Then they waited. The minutes stretched into an hour. Outside the windows, the violet crystalline growth crept closer to the capital. Evacuation ships were lifting off, but there were not enough of them. Millions of Calovians would be left behind. Then the communication system activated. A response was coming in. Minara stared at her instruments in disbelief. "Chancellor, we are receiving a reply. The signal is coming from Sector 9947. That is ... She looked up at him with wide eyes. "That is the Sol System. The quarantine zone. The human home world." Viron felt his heart racing. "Play it." The speakers crackled with static, and then a voice came through, speaking in rough but understandable galactic standard. The accent was strange, clipped, and efficient. "Message received. Calovia Prime. This is Commander Sarah Reeves of the Earth Defense Initiative. We have analyzed your situation and are dispatching a fleet to your location. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours. Hold your position and protect your civilians. Do not attempt to engage the scourge directly. We are coming." The transmission ended abruptly. Minara looked at Viron with an expression that mixed hope and terror. They are coming. The humans are actually coming. What have we done? Veron stared out at his dying world. We have given our people a chance. Whatever the humans are, whatever they might do, it cannot be worse than extinction. But even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. The galaxy feared humans for a reason. They were a species that had conquered a death world, that had turned their hostile environment into an advantage, that had developed technologies and tactics specifically designed for warfare. They were everything the Calovians were not. 4 hours later, as the Scourge drew within sight of the capital's outer walls, the sensors detected something entering the system. Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Not graceful, elegant vessels like those of the Galactic Council, but angular, aggressive-looking craft that bristled with weapons. The human fleet had arrived, and Calovia Prime was about to learn what happened when you called upon predators for help. Asterisk. Fire and steel. The human fleet materialized at the edge of the Calovian system like wolves emerging from the darkness. Commander Sarah Reeves stood on the bridge of the ESS Defiant, her eyes scanning the tactical displays with practiced efficiency. She was a veteran of the Outer Colonies War, a conflict that had hardened her in ways that most galactic species could not comprehend. Her face bore a scar along her left cheek, a reminder of a battle where a ship had been boarded by hostile forces. She had survived that day through sheer determination and the willingness to do what others would not. Status report, she commanded, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the bridge. Lieutenant Marcus Chun looked up from his station. His family had been military for 6 generations, and he carried that legacy with quiet pride. Ma'am, we have 23 ships in formation. Heavy cruisers defiant, relentless, and unyielding at the front. Destroyer squadrons Delta and Echo on the flanks. Medical frigates and troop carriers in the rear. All systems are operational and ready for engagement. Sensors are reading massive, crystalline growth across the planet's surface, added Ensign Yuki Tanaka from the science station. The young officer had been with the fleet for only 2 years, but she had proven herself capable under pressure. The entity they call the Scourge appears to be a parasitic crystal-based life form. It feeds on both organic matter and energy sources. Growth rate is exponential. Based on current spread patterns, the Calovian capital will be overrun in approximately 90 minutes. Reeves studied the holographic display showing Calovia Prime. The beautiful world was being strangled by violet crystal, formations that spread like a disease across its surface. She had seen many horrors in her career, but watching a civilization die in real time never became easier. Time to show them what humans do best. Helen, take us in. Battle speed. All ships assume attack formation Omega-7. The fleet surged forward, accelerating to speeds that would have made most galactic species uncomfortable. Human ships were built differently than those of the Galactic Council. Where other civilizations prioritized elegance and efficiency, humans built for survival and warfare. The hulls were thick, layered with ablative armor that could withstand tremendous punishment. The engines were overpowered, designed to function even when damaged. Every system had redundancies, because humans had learned the hard way that wars were won by those who kept fighting after everything went wrong. Commander, we are being hailed by the Calovian government, reported the communications officer. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life, showing Chancellor Veron and his advisor Minara. They looked exhausted and terrified, their silver skin dull with stress. Reeves had read the briefing files on Calovian physiology and culture during the journey. They were a peaceful species that had never developed weapons or military tactics. They created art and pursued knowledge. They were, in human terms, innocent. Commander Reeves, Veron said, his voice shaking slightly. Thank you for coming. We did not know if anyone would answer our call. We always answer, Reeves replied simply. When someone calls for help, humans come. That is who we are. She leaned forward slightly. Chancellor, I need you to understand something. We are going to save your people, but our methods will be different from what you are accustomed to. We will use violence. We will take risks that seem reckless. We will do things that may shock you, but everything we do will be to protect your civilians. Minara spoke up, her large eyes filled with worry. Commander, the scourge cannot be stopped. We have tried everything. Energy weapons only feed it. Physical barriers are consumed. How can you possibly fight something that turns our own defenses against us? Reeves allowed herself a small, grim smile. Because we come from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We learned to fight things that could not be reasoned with, things that were stronger and more numerous than us. We learned to adapt, to improvise, and to never give up. The scourge may be difficult to stop, but difficult is just another word for possible. What do you need from us? Viron asked. Keep your people in the shelters. Do not try to evacuate during the battle. Your ships are not built for combat conditions, and you will only put yourselves at risk. Trust us to do our job. She paused, then added more softly, We will not let your people down. I give you my word as a human, and we take our word very seriously. The transmission ended, and Reeves turned to her tactical officer. Major James Rodriguez was a veteran of dozens of ground campaigns. His dark eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much death, but refused to become numb to it. Major, prepare the ground teams. We are going in hot. Rodriguez nodded sharply. Marines are ready, Commander. We have 6 full battalions armed with thermal lances and sonic disruptors. If this crystalline entity has a weakness, we will find it. And if it does not, then we will make one. That is what we do. The fleet entered Calovia Prime's atmosphere with controlled fury. The scourge immediately detected their presence and began responding. Massive crystalline spires rose from the infected areas, launching shards of violet crystal toward the human ships. The attack was overwhelming in its intensity, thousands of projectiles filling the sky like deadly rain. Evasive maneuvers, Reeves commanded calmly. All ships return fire. Pattern Delta. What happened next would become legendary in galactic military history. The human ships did not try to avoid all the incoming fire. Instead, they used their heavy armor to absorb hits while positioning themselves to protect the uninfected areas below. Shields flared and hulls buckled under the assault, but the ships held. And while they took damage, their weapons spoke with devastating efficiency. Human military. Doctrine was built on a simple principle learned from centuries of warfare on Earth. When protecting something, you become the wall. You stand between the innocent and the threat, and you do not move. The Calovian civilians huddled in their shelters, heard the thunder of human ships overhead, taking hit after hit, but never retreating. Ground teams away, reported Rodriguez. Deployment successful across 12 landing zones. Marine Captain Jennifer Walsh led her company through the violet-tinted streets of the Calovian capital. Her powered armor was scorched and dented from the landing, but it still functioned. Around her, 200 Marines moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a defensive perimeter around a civilian shelter that housed over 10,000 Calovians. The scourge responded to their presence immediately. Crystalline growths began erupting from the ground, reaching toward the humans like grasping claws. Walsh had fought on ice worlds and desert planets, in zero gravity and crushing atmospheres. She had learned that the key to surviving hostile environments was to turn them against themselves. All units, initiate Protocol Inferno. Use thermal lances at maximum output. Let us see how this crystal handles extreme heat. The Marines opened fire with weapons that generated temperatures hot enough to melt steel. The violet crystals began to crack and shatter under the assault, but the Scourge was learning. New growths emerged that were more resistant to heat. Walsh smiled behind her helmet. So it could adapt. Good. That meant it could be tricked. Switch to sonic disruptors. Alternate patterns. Keep it guessing. The battle became a deadly dance of adaptation and counter-adaptation. The Scourge would develop a defense, and the humans would switch tactics. When the crystals became resistant to heat, the humans used sound. When they adapted to sound, the humans switched to kinetic weapons. When kinetic weapons failed, they used electromagnetic pulses. The Calovians watched from their shelters in amazement. The humans were not just fighting. They were thinking, learning, and adapting faster than the Scourge could compensate. In orbit, Commander Reeves had identified the source of the infection. Deep beneath the planet's surface, massive crystal formations were drawing energy from the planetary core itself. That was why the Scourge could spread so quickly. It was feeding on the planet's own life force. Lieutenant Shun, prepare the seismic charges. We are going to hit them where they live. Shun looked up sharply. Commander, detonating charges of that magnitude underground could cause massive earthquakes. The Calovian cities might suffer structural damage. Reeves met his eyes steadily. And if we do nothing, there will be no cities left at all. Calculate the blast pattern to minimize damage to populated areas, but make it strong enough to shatter those crystal formations. We are ending this now. Asterisk. The math was brutal. Any explosion powerful enough to destroy the Scourge's root system would cause significant collateral damage. But leaving the Scourge alive meant certain extinction for the Calovians. It was the kind of impossible choice that humans had been making throughout their history. Chun worked quickly, his fingers flying across the controls. I have a solution, Commander. If we coordinate the detonation with simultaneous strikes from the fleet, we can channel most of the seismic energy away from the population centers. Casualties will be minimal, but there will be some damage to infrastructure. Do it. The seismic charges descended through the atmosphere like spears of judgment. At the same moment, every ship in the human fleet opened fire on the crystal spires rising from the planet's surface. The coordinated strike was a masterpiece of timing and precision. The charges penetrated deep into the planet's crust and detonated in perfect synchronization. The result was catastrophic for the Scourge. The massive crystal formations underground shattered into billions of fragments. Without their connection to the planetary core, the surface crystals began to die, their violet glow fading to dull gray. The parasitic growths stopped spreading and started crumbling. On the ground, Captain Walsh watched as the crystalline claws reaching for her position suddenly went still and began to crack apart. All units advance. Secure the civilian areas. Get medics to anyone who needs help. The Marines moved forward, and behind them came something the Calovians had never expected. Human medical teams. Dr. Sarah Kim had volunteered for the mission despite knowing the risks. She was a trauma surgeon who specialized in xenobiology, and she had brought supplies to treat injured Calovians. Her team moved through the shelters, providing medical care with the same intensity the Marines had shown in battle. A young Calovian child had been injured by falling debris. His name was Torin, and he was crying in pain and fear. Dr. Kim knelt beside him, her voice gentle despite the chaos around her. Hey there, little one. I know you are scared, but I am going to help you. You are going to be okay. Torin's mother watched in amazement as the human doctor worked with careful precision, treating her son's injuries with technology and techniques that were more advanced than anything the Calovians possessed. Hours later, as the last of the Scourge was cleared from the planet, Chancellor Veron stood in the ruins of his capital and watched the human ships in orbit. They had taken heavy damage protecting his world. 3 ships had been destroyed, and hundreds of humans had died fighting an enemy they had never encountered before, for a species they had never met. Viron found Commander Reeves overseeing the cleanup operations. She looked exhausted, her uniform stained with dust and blood, but her eyes were still alert. "Commander," he began, struggling to find words adequate to express what he felt. "Your people sacrificed themselves for us. Why? You did not know us. We are not your allies. Why would you risk so much for strangers?" Reeves turned to face him, and Viron saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. It was not aggression or predatory hunger. It was something the Colovians had thought was unique to peaceful species. It was compassion, fierce and unyielding. "Because that is what humans do," she said simply. "When someone is in trouble, we help. When innocents are threatened, we fight. When others say something is impossible, we try anyway. Your people called for help, and we answered. That is all the reason we need." She looked up at the stars, where her damaged fleet waited. "Yes, we are from a death world. Yes, we evolved as predators. Yes, we know how to fight and destroy. But we also know something else. We know that strength without compassion is just cruelty. We know that the strong have a duty to protect the weak. We learned that on our harsh world, where survival meant working together despite our differences." Viron felt something shift in his understanding. The galaxy had been wrong about humans. They were not monsters to be feared. They were guardians who had been forged by hardship into something both terrible and beautiful. They were the fire that destroys, but also the steel that protects. In the days that followed, the story of the Battle of Kilovia Prime spread across the galaxy. The Galactic Council watched the recordings in stunned silence. They saw humans taking impossible risks to protect civilians. They saw ships staying in formation, even as they were torn apart. They saw Marines charging into danger without hesitation. They saw doctors treating alien patients with the same care they would show their own species. The Death World humans were not the mindless predators the galaxy had feared. They were something far more complex and far more inspiring. They were a species that had learned to turn their savage nature toward noble purposes. Months later, the Colovian world was rebuilt with human assistance. The 2 species formed a bond that would reshape galactic politics. Other civilizations began to reconsider their fear of Death World species. Perhaps, they thought, strength forged in hardship was not something to be quarantined, but something to be welcomed. Commander. Sarah Reeves returned to Earth a hero, but she rarely spoke of what had happened at Kilovia Prime. When asked why humans had risked so much for strangers, she always gave the same answer. Because they asked for help, and we heard them. That is what humans do, and across the galaxy, those words became a promise. When the desperate sent out their cries for help, humanity would answer with fire and steel, with courage and compassion, with everything they had. Because that was what it meant to be human. Asterisk.